Hello, everyone. Welcome to Office Hour for today. So, today for me is August 11th, but for at least one of our guests and hopefully some viewers, it is Friday morning, August 12th. So, I'm really excited today. We are going to be talking about a subject that is near and dear to our heart here at Social Media Pulse Community, and that is the subject of community, the subject of building community online and specifically through social media. And I have two guests today who are experts in that topic who are going to be joining me, and I can't wait for that conversation. So, in the interest of community, if you're joining us on social media, we're live right now on Facebook. We're in a couple of Facebook groups. We're on our Facebook page. We're also live on LinkedIn. We're live on YouTube, but we are live in the Social Media Pulse community right now. And if you want to jump on over to that conversation in the community, I'm going to throw up the uh, link for that. I put the wrong link in. Just give me a second. You can join us in the community, and you will get, if you are participating in the conversation in the community, you will be able to get an office hour badge to add to your Social Media Pulse community profile. So go ahead, visit socialmediapulse.info/, office hour August 11th, or just go to socialmediapulse.community. We're right there at the top of the screen to join the conversation. So, if you're joining us on social media, that's great. You can hop on over to the community wherever you're at. We are monitoring comments, we're monitoring chat. So, go ahead, drop us a line, let us know where you are joining us from. But without further ado, let's get into that topic of community. So I've got two guests joining me today who are experts in that particular area. So my first guest is Fiona Lucas, and Fiona is a Australian-based social media and online community strategist. She is joining us very, very early from down under, with her coffee in hand. But she's a online community strategist, a consultant, a mentor, a moderator, a speaker, and author. She does it all. And she's the founder of the 4 R's of reputation with her business, which is called I Respect Online. She believes in putting humanity first in all online engagements. So, hi, Fiona. Thanks so much for joining me this morning.
Thanks for having me. It's exciting to be on the show.
Yeah. Very, very glad that you were able to get up early to join our community to talk about community.
It's one of the favorite topics to talk about, that's for sure.
My next guest, Jen Cole. So, Jen hails from just slightly north of where I live. It is absolutely a small world. I love how um, online communities can be from literally around the world, but also right up the road. And so, Jen is from Wichita, Kansas. She has a strong belief that social media channels should be utilized to grow tight knit, organic communities of followers who genuinely identify with the brand. Her background is really extensive in social media marketing, which spans about 10 years. She's a social media marketer at Greteman Group, based in Wichita, also the owner of Xstand Standing Desks, of which I need one. They're so cool. And she's co host of Making a Marketer podcast, and she's a globally known public speaker. So, hi, Jen. How are you today?
I am full. I'm so happy to be here, Ruth. This is going to be fun.
This is going to be so much fun because I can't wait to learn so much from both of you ladies. So, I think the thing that really strikes me when we talk about communities on social media is sometimes that line between social media management and community management. People assume that it's the same thing. You know, if you work in social media, oftentimes you're responsible for some aspect of community management, but they're really kind of two different things. So I'm going to start with you, Jen. How do you define community on social media, and how is that different than social media management?
Well, really, I define community on social media as forming, it's kind of all how you respond. It's in the messaging and your engagement plan. And so I feel like if you are going onto social media and you're picking a channel to spend your time on, um, you should definitely make it a point to make your messaging mix engaging, ask questions, be kind of funny, have a personality, have a, go with your brand voice, but be approachable. And I think that that's quite a bit different from social media management, because the way that I view social media management is more of, okay, what hashtags am I going to use? What's the post going to be? I need to go size the photos, and then I need to plan out, schedule the posts. But then the engagement, the community building part comes after all of that during the week. After you set everything into autopilot, you come back and you join the actual conversations that you yourself started.
Yeah, that's great. Fiona, for you, is that similar to how you view community for
Well,
social media,
yeah.
or what do you think about it?
Well, I think so. I think that there's a slightly different focus when you're, as a community manager, your focus really is on the brand, and you're, doing all the bits to keep pushing out what their message is. Whereas when you're working in a community as a community manager, you're really, now, although you're an advocate for the brand, your focus is definitely on the people. So it's about, building that strength, and the becoming more of the personality of the brand, and bringing it to life over, the do of there's no sell really in the community, except for the fact that you love what you're doing so much that will bring, that side of the brand into the community. But really the focus is all on the human, and it's all on making sure they're having an amazing experience. So the focus to me is quite different in that regard.
Yeah, I really like that distinction. And I think I would add to that too, is just as you ladies were talking, it makes me think of, social media management. There's that management piece and the tactical piece, and the part that you can plan out really is front and center, but community is much more organic, and therefore to do it well, it has to be more authentic, right? You can't really plan how you're going to engage in a conversation because the conversations are happening in real time.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, that is great. Okay, Fiona, back to you. So, if you're a social media manager and you've been doing it for a while, or if you're newer to the field of social media management and all of a sudden you're also responsible for community management, what's really important for you to know?
Gee, okay. I guess it's the balance and the focus of just getting your time right, and making sure that you're well organized. I think one of the most important things is being able to then schedule in advance what you can for your management side of things, because even though you'll have plans for the community and there will be some things you put in there, if you're actually the person that's going in and trying to rev everyone, get them excited, trying to encourage people to have conversations, then a lot of energy goes into that. I mean, I'm a big advocate as it grows, and I think they are two separate jobs personally. When you're in a smaller community, yeah, you might be doing everything, but I think it's really important for brands to acknowledge the role of community management as being quite a central role within a business, and it kind of does need, its own energy around that. So that's a really big driver, and I'm very passionate about trying to get people to allow the separation between that, and allow people, you may develop in the role, but I do feel that they can be quite separate. But I think when it comes to, as a social media manager, you've just really got to make sure you've got that content planned out, that you can schedule using, amazing tools like Agorapulse, and things like that, to actually, help you to manage the content and the roles and your time, because that it can take a lot of energy in a community.
Yeah. Jen, same question. Like, you're imparting wisdom to somebody who's doing community for the first time. What do you tell them?
Yep. Sorry, my dogs are going to bark for a minute. I really think it is about time management. You set a conversation out there, but then what I like to do, and the way that I found out just recently that I thrive, is literal daily checklist for myself. Like, okay, so I'm going to work on copywriting and graphics right now, but then here in a little, and then I'm going to check that off. The checking off is huge for me. I figured out.
That's the best feeling, right? The checking off is the best feeling.
It's funny. I didn't realize that about myself until just a few months ago. And then I'm like, okay, so my next task is make sure I'm like going back and engaging in all these conversations that I have across all these different channels for all these different clients. And then, like go in, and that's kind of like an ongoing thing that I don't check off until the end of the day. So it's just kind of hanging out there on my calendar, and I just, oh yeah, I need to go back and do that again because it's still there. I can still see it. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's kind of figuring out one, how your brain works, being extremely organized, planning, and then for me, ticking the things off. But I think you need to first be invested in the brands that you're representing, because you need to be able to hold valuable conversations about these brands, about their products, about their values, about even the culture of their staff. And so one cool thing that we're doing with a client right now is they're choosing a group of social media ambassadors who are going to like kind of collect content for Reels, but they're also going to be making sure that they go back into the brand social media channels and like kind of starting conversations in the comments as social media ambassadors. So I'm kind of excited about that to see how that goes.
Yeah, I think that's a good segue into a question that was percolating as both of you were chatting too, and I'll kick it back to you, Jen, about community management when you're doing it for a brand. Is it best for the brand to engage in one-on-one conversations with a person, or is it better if a person who's representing the brand or evangelizing for the brand or being an ambassador is doing that relationship building? What do you think?
I think if it's the brand, I don't have any clients that I do this for, but I have done this for a client in the past. And it was when I worked with Fiona, actually happens to be back when I worked for Social Media Examiner. And I was managing all their social media channels. What I would do, and I got this from Eric Fisher, who was my predecessor in that position, was I would answer as the brand, but I would always put -Jen. And on everything, and I think that for one personalizes the brand. Again, of course, as a personal brand, I was always out there touting as well too. But Social Media Examiner never asked me to do that. It's just I love them so much, and I naturally did that. And hopefully, any brand has employees that are excited about where they work and want to do the same kind of thing. So I think it kind of just depends on how your brand is online, how they want to present themselves to the world, because some brands are very, very buttoned up, and some brands are a little more playful. And so I think you really need to stay true to who your brand is, and then kind of decide how you want to go about doing that.
Mm-hmm. We had those conversations when we just launched Social Media Pulse, and therefore our social media campaigns and channels that we were doing. And we had that conversation on our team. We have a small team. Our team is dedicated to community. But we had those conversations about, do we sign the post? Do we just act as the brand? And for now, we are working as we want the brand to establish a personality. We kind of all do have the same voice and tone when we're answering. So we're answering as the brand. And then if we want to add a personal spin to it, we'll do that from our personal channels.
Yeah, I like that. That's really smart. That's really smart. But I've seen it in action.
Yeah. Fiona, do you have anything to add to that?
I was just going to say, I think it does depend on what you're trying to build within the community. I think when you're really trying to engage members in the community, can be very good to come from that more personal approach, I think, because it can soften, especially I remember working in Wave Video in the community there, and it was early days, and people were quite shy quite often, apart from unless they had a problem, and we were trying to separate that. We didn't want it to be a support community as in, I've got a problem with something. It was more about how can you use this amazing product, and exciting each other about it, and sort of exploring and trying to educate people, give them opportunities. So I think in that case, and I found it very valuable to then, get the people higher up. You're getting the CFO and the CMO and all those sort of people to actually come into the community, and so the voice is there because you do have, you know, obviously how you want to present the company itself. So you've got that underpinning. But I find that relationship when you're actually human to human, it just seems to make people a little bit more relaxed, you know, say, oh, they're the people behind the brand. I can relate to them. Look at them. They're human and they actually care. And I think, you know, to me, that's a really huge part of getting a community really, you know, that trust factor starts to come into there. I think how you build that trust.
Yeah, you know that it's a real person on the other side of those comments, and that you can have that conversation and continue that conversation with the same person. So I'll add, we have a couple of comments from our community as we're chatting about this. So Deb, who is our community manager, who both of you know, Deb really does believe in signing those posts. She says she does it with all of her clients that she has. She also has an agency, so she does it with her clients. And she does it everywhere except with social media posts, because we decided as a team to forgo that for now. But she thinks it's better for it to come personally. But then we also have a comment that I'll go ahead and throw up here from Phyllis, who also works with the social media pulse team doing some community management. And she says that this is tricky because sometimes if you're signing posts, admins or moderators can get personally targeted for those support type questions. To loop it back to what you talked to about support, Fiona, is that they're going directly to that person because they have that relationship. So
done that.
yeah, so Fiona, comment about this a little bit. So do you think that the pros of developing those personal relationships and knowing that there's a human behind the brand or behind the comments, and knowing and giving that person an identity, does that outweigh the risk that you have of someone suddenly treating you like you're a support person?
I think it really all comes down to what you're building the community around and how you set up. It's so important to have those rules, especially, you know, going back to the earlier question about somebody just starting off, making sure that it's a lot of clarity around how you want the community to work, and then letting the members know that this is the correct way to do things. And you do have to learn to be quite strong at directing that, you know, and letting people know that you don't want to engage, or you won't be engaging outside. You know, if you're in a Facebook group, for example, don't start private messaging people. So one way of getting around that is that if you are working as a brand, that you just sign off with a first name or something, so it does soften it a little bit without it actually making that entire you know, relationship that easy to do.
Yeah.
Some communities, of course, want to have support in there. They want to do that kind of thing where you're fixing problems. And so again, to me, it just really does come down to setting the guidelines and the way that you educate people into how they should engage in the community, what's acceptable. Because if you don't have that and you're not strong about that, well, then it can get a bit crazy. And, you know, it does help you also keep A, on brand, and B, focused on whatever the communities come together around, I think.
Yeah, I think, and I'll underscore that point too. I do think it's really important. Facebook groups in particular, there are so many that I'm in that there aren't rules and guidelines, and you have the ability to do that. And really on any kind of online community, whether it's a standalone community or social media, you have the ability to do that. So you should, you absolutely need to set those parameters in place, and, kind of a code of conduct for members of your community.
Yeah. Sure.
So let's talk a little bit about building trust through community.
Comment, sorry.
Yeah.
She said social media managers end up creating second accounts.
Yes.
Which I don't know.
Which is it is true, which and one of those things about it violated terms and conditions for many, many years. But Facebook recently rolled out, their news about the ability for you to have 5 profiles and professional accounts, and we'll see how that all shakes out. We don't have to dive into that right now, but Phyllis really brings up a valid point that it's not the best way to do things, but it has been a reality and a forced reality for many social media managers, and we don't want to ignore that reality. So maybe this Facebook thing will help with that. Who knows?
Maybe.
Oh, but okay, let's go back to whoops, I'm gonna put that one up on accident. Um, so about building trust around a brand and doing that through community. That's kind of what you both really have some strong expertise about. So I would just like to hear, Jen, I'll start with you. Thoughts and advice for building trust around a brand and doing it through community.
Well, I think that you need to come if you're truly there to build community. I think you need to come with a kind of state of mind where you are there to add value. You're also there to learn from the people in your community. As a brand, one of the most important things that we can do on social media is listen to the conversation that's being had about our brand, and of course join in whenever necessary. It's not always necessary. Sometimes it's okay to stand back and listen and be an observer. You got to picture yourself in an actual physical social situation. Sometimes am I part of this conversation, or is it A, B, and I need to see my way out, and just let it be. So I think you need to, coming to the conversation, the social environment with a state of mind of listening, adding value, and of course, if you make a mistake, being genuine and owning up to it, addressing it, saying, yes, I see you, I hear you, and here's how we're going to make things better. And so the more genuine and approachable that you can be within your social media communities, I believe that's the easiest way to truly build real trust.
Great. Fiona, what thoughts do you have about building trust?
Absolutely. I mean, I've always had, I've done a lot of work around reputation management as well. And I have my little equation, which is, I say it's the perception of a brand and the experience becomes a reputation, and your reputation is everything when it comes to trust, because when you have a great reputation, then people automatically soften into going, well, if everyone's saying great stuff about this, there's always already an element of trust being built between the two. So I think, that authenticity and everything that Jen said about sitting back and listening, I mean, that's the power of community for a brand, because it's how you get the pulse of what do people want, what it changes, what are they looking for. It's how you can keep innovating because you're listening, and the power of the conversations can really help a brand to develop. So that listening ability is so important. But trust comes from people feeling respected as well. So I think as long as there's that, and also I think the rules come into that too, that guidelines, because you feel more comfortable, and if people feel safe in an environment, they open up more, and that builds trust as well.
Absolutely. I'm going to pause for just a moment to let the people who are watching live right now, or if you're watching the replay, we are all about community here at Social Media Pulse and Pulse Academy. So we have a dedicated space online where this conversation can continue, and we can continue to build community around the topic of community. So I'm going to go ahead and throw that link up again for those if you want to join the conversation right now live, or in asynchronously months from now even, socialmediapulse.info/office-hour/August 11th. We've also got links in the comments. And if you are watching live right now and you have specific questions for our panelists, go ahead. I invite you to ask those questions. We are monitoring chat both in the community and on social media. So with that little plug said, I want to continue the conversation about trust and specifically reputation management. So I think, reputation management, crisis communication, it's all kind of tied together a little bit. And oftentimes what we see is communities can turn on brands pretty quickly. So I'm going to put you on the spot, both of you think about a little bit. Have you ever worked with a brand or had a situation where a community turned and there was maybe some negative feedback, but you saw other members of the community coming to defend the brand, or even vice versa. Like they hadn't done a great job building the community and it just kind of spiraled and they couldn't control it. Anything come to mind?
I can
Yeah.
think of just some early Facebook groups, not that I was managing, but just participating in, that really hadn't thought about why they were coming together. And they kind of just, again, not strong moderation and that kind of thing allowed some topics that were introduced. And I think that's where you have to be careful again about, particularly depending what you work. For example, if you're a local, council, a local government, and you've got a community around that, and you allow politics or something to come into the conversations, then without that strong moderation, say, oh, look, and someone to guide, I think it's so important. You've got to be, as a social media community manager, you need to be able to be confident that if you see a conversation that is going a bit haywire, you do have to jump in, because I've definitely seen it, and the moderators went crazy and started just throwing people out. And of course that built up a whole lot of angst, because they'd go to another group to complain about this group, and it was quite it was a very big group, and I won't mention who it was, but or where it was, but it was sort of like a state kind of group, and it was a quite toxic environment, and it did take a lot of work for them to then eventually realize, okay, maybe we need to be a little bit more active in how we're moderating and what we're doing here to help. Not that you want to control a narrative per se, but you do want to keep everyone with a balance of respect for each other's views, and also to make sure that you're not drifting away from what the purpose of that community is anyway. So you don't want to bring in too many outside sort of discussions that are way off path for what the community is about.
Yeah, I have some examples very similar to that. Jen, what about you?
Well, I remember back when Social Media Examiner hosted Social Media Marketing, where they still do. They host Social Media Marketing World, and for years I was their community manager, and year after year on Twitter, sure enough, following the hashtag SMMW, whatever year it was, this one person every single year would show up and troll that hashtag, like just the same guy every year. And, I remember Eric just rolling his eyes the first time he would see it every year. For us, we loved our brand and we loved our event, and we, of course, every great thing is going to have a few trolls, and so I remember the first couple of years we just let him, he's not doing us any harm or anything. But then I remember one year Eric got on there, and I thought it was like the coolest thing ever. Eric got on Twitter and he's like, could you kindly not, or something to that effect, just so tactfully, hey, if you don't like this conversation, you don't need to be here, kind of. But then we'd also notice other people from our community would come in and say, hey, you're not even a ticket holder. Why do you troll our hashtag when you don't even care to come to the event? You don't know what you're missing. All of that kind of stuff. The community would come and go to battle. It was amazing. It was so cool to see that kind of stuff. And of course, that event it's not perfect, but it is wonderful. And it's great to see that kind of advocacy from their entire community.
When the
I've lost your sound, Ruth.
Yeah, we lost your sound, Ruth.
Yeah, you're not there. Oh no.
You gotta love
microphones. I don't know if this microphone's probably not as good. Maybe my microphone lost power. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
I said what I don't know where at that in my thought process you lost me, but the thought process was, and that is a great example of that idea of there was community around the event, existing community, that even though you're not excited to have like any kind of semblance of a negative comment or a troll, you're still getting engagement because the community is coming in and engaging with the conversation. So it's still overall positive versus negative.
Yeah.
And your examples, Fiona, about strong moderation, I really like that, because as you were talking about different groups, it does come to mind for me specifically, probably about, I don't even remember when Facebook first launched groups. Has it been 10 years ago? Probably not quite that long, but maybe 8 years ago. Local, actual physical geographic communities would have Facebook groups, and it would inevitably, something would go off the rails, someone would get kicked out or offended, and then there would be these other groups that would pop up, and the title would be, whatever town, whatever community, group with no rules.
I remember that.
Yeah.
So towns have two different groups now, the one that's heavily moderated and the one that's a little bit more free-for-all or laissez-faire. So that reminded me of that. But I also am a member of some large groups that have really strong community, but not strong moderation. Because the group is so large, I think the person who is moderating the group is not equipped to be a community manager. They just set up a group. It's around, university sports team, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so they're just a fan of the sport. They set up the group, and the group is so large, when people come in and are commenting or, trying to sell, or it's things that aren't related to the topic, other members are trying to moderate and say, please don't let this happen. But there's not strong moderation. And so the overall community is pretty frustrated, because there's one or two people in a group of 30,000 that's not really playing by the rules. So that's hard. And that's why strong moderation, I love that point. Good community managers also have to be rule enforcers.
We do, but you can also, when you've got a really strong, you've built that strong, excited community that are passionate about the brand, again, from your listening and observing, you can choose people within that community that you can then ask to be a moderator. And I think that can work really well too. But you do have to be careful with that, because again, as I said, in that other group, it was just that they allowed kind of, who wants to be a moderator? Hands went up. And unfortunately, they had very strong views and would get rid of anyone that didn't agree with what they thought. So it was like, I think, you have to be very mindful of who you bring in. But as a community manager, being able to look for those people and give them a little bit of, training and nurturing to help guide them, that will really help your job too.
Yeah. You're a moderator, not a dictator, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I'm not sure who this very lovely Facebook user is, but they are complimentary of the conversation, and I'm having a ton of fun as well. And so I'm glad it looks like it's probably a comment from a group, and we don't have permission to see that user's name. So thank you, whoever that might be. Great conversation. I accidentally click things twice. That happens every time. I take one down and accidentally put another one up. So speaking about moderation, that takes time. Community management takes time. Engaging with the community, moderating other community members. And a lot of times community managers are doing it on top of other tasks. Jen, you mentioned your list earlier, but let's talk a little bit more about how much time you should allocate toward community management. I know it's probably an it depends type answer, but what thoughts do you have about maybe the ratio of time that you're spending community managing versus content creation or other things?
It's hard to define that, because I find myself going and doing it certain times a day, like several times a day, but for different amounts of time. And it kind of also depends on what kind of content did you post. Was it a press release? Was it just an engagement, like a question? Was it a poll? Those kinds of things. So I think that when you're planning out your content, you also need to, hey, okay, yesterday we posted a press release. We need to go back and see like what kind of comments we're getting on that, because on LinkedIn it could go completely crazy. On Facebook it could be crickets. And so it's one of those things where Agorapulse, like literally, I live in Agorapulse. This is not supposed to be an ad, but I live in Agorapulse for this exact reason, because that's where the conversations are pulled into, and it just makes it so easy to stay on top of those. And then, like, if something's going a little bit haywire and I need to go actually over to the Facebook page or over to the LinkedIn page to see, to like hide a comment or something like that. Yeah, I know you can ban users and stuff, but we try not to do that kind of thing unless it's just insane.
Yeah.
But like there's certain actions you can only do natively, and so but it's good to get that flag in Agorapulse to remind you, hey, I need to go do this. So I think putting a time on it is a little difficult, but I would say I think it takes a lot more content than it does to pop back in and to be part of the conversation. And they're both fun and they're both inspiring in different, but I think it takes a lot more time to create the content than it does to get back in and engage with the conversations, especially when everyone's got the same sentiment. It's like, yeah, thanks. Okay, awesome. It's, yeah. So I would say it usually just kind of depends on what you're doing.
So it's not a burden. I think that's the
not a burden. It's fun.
It doesn't have to be a burden. And there are lots of tools that help you with listening. Of course, I think Agorapulse is the best one. I use it every day as well. But there are other tools that can help you with listening. So I think that's a good point to drive home too, is that it does become easier if you have tools that can pull conversations into the same place. And so you can see it from that bird's eye view and then dive in more detail and get more engaged on specific platforms if you need to. I absolutely agree, Jen.
Yeah.
What do you think, Fiona?
Yeah, I agree with all those things, and I think trying to put our time on it is really hard because, and also again, I guess it depends what stage of growth a business is in as well as whether they're still in the trying to brand build. They're probably like putting a lot more content out there initially, so that again. I can't help it. Back in my head goes, separate those roles. Let's have two people, it just sort of, it can be, I have seen job descriptions where you look at it and you go, there is no way you do that in one job. It's like, okay, that's a lot of work that you're asking. I mean, one of the things that can be so helpful though, as well, of course, is sort of trying to get user-generated content, because if you can get that happening, then it kind of takes a bit of the burden off, because a really active community, sometimes you don't even need to prompt too much in there because they're just constantly bringing up enough stuff because they're so excited to share what they've done, or they might raise a question about, has someone come across something, and I'm not meaning in a support kind of way, more a nurturing kind of way to each other. It's like, hey, I needed to, perhaps if they were in a group about design, and they've said something like, hey, has anyone ever come across a good idea to how they can, get this layer to work or something like that in this particular thing, and people jump in and they're all happy to help out and suggest ways that they've achieved that result or whatever. But so to me, if you can get that user-generated content going, it's going to help ease the burden, because you then have a bit more time free that you can then put into all that other content production, which is massive and constant.
Yeah. Speaking of user-generated content, that reminds me. So I think my boss, Paul Bradley, who is our head of global community at Social Media Pulse and Agorapulse, is listening. So Paul, you're going to have to comment if I get this wrong, because I heard him say a statistic yesterday in a report he was giving that sort of surprised me, actually. So Paul's worked in the community space for a very long time, not specifically social media community, but, standalone communities. And so very much a cousin to, but not identical to, social media community. But he mentioned within the first year of a community launching that a lot of times the community staff or people who are responsible for are creating, 90% of the content. And you're just lucky if you can get user-generated content for about 10%. And that's even things like questions, comments in support communities, et cetera. And so the easier you can make it for that community, as you mentioned, user-generated content, it really helps get those wheels off the ground for your community. And we're really pleased at Social Media Pulse because we are outperforming that statistic within the first 4 months of launch. So we're really
That's
excited
awesome.
about that. So we've got a great community. And if you haven't joined the Social Media Pulse community, I'm going to pause and do my plug again. So the Social Media Pulse community, if you're catching this and you're not familiar and you're not a member, our online community, it's a standalone community. We, of course, have social media presence, but it's a standalone online community built specifically for social media managers. Paul did a lot of discovery, uncovering what social media managers need to upskill their careers. And we built the community to do that. So we have educational content, which I oversee with Pulse Academy. So we do things like these office hours, we do online courses, and we have study groups where you can have community and conversations around educational content. We also have news and content and tips led by our fearless senior editor, Christine Gritman. With great guest contributors. Both Fiona and Jen have contributed content to the Social Media Pulse community. And I think both of those went live this week, ironically, right? Or I think maybe you've had content before, but both of you had posts that went up this week in the community I saw, which was great timing. So great news and content from a lot of experts in a lot of different topics. We also have just the community space itself where you can ask questions and get support. And we have events and activities that our community manager, Deb Mitchell, oversees, as well as a job board. So you can take all the things that you're learning at Social Media Pulse or all of the skills that you're gaining and the relationships you're making and go get a job. So it's all under one roof in one place, and it's all completely free. So join at socialmediapulse.community if you haven't. We would love to have you there. Okay, that's my plug, my little sales pitch for now. And I have another question. Just, I'm a little bit newer to the field of community management. I've worked in social for a long time, and by the very nature of social, I've done some community management, but never really considered it a formal part of what I was doing until this job, which I started in January. So teach me other things about community that I don't know or we haven't talked about yet. What are some things that you know to be true? I'll start with you, Jen, that you know to be true about social media community or just community in general that we haven't talked about yet.
Yeah, I think we've touched a little bit on it, but I think that if you're going to have a big group of people in your group or in your community, I think it's great what Social Media Pulse community has done. You have reached out to very active users and contributors and founding members and asked them, hey, would you be part of our community crew? And we're all like, of course we will. We love you. I know Fiona's one, I'm one. And I think having a team of folks who love your brand and a team of folks who are empaths and want to help people naturally come in, and whether it's sparking conversation, whether it's trying to keep the conversation going, whether it's connecting other individuals who probably has the answer to the question that you're reading right there. I think you guys really did a great job, and I think that that's something that we haven't necessarily dove deep into, but I think if you're going to have a large group, you definitely need your little army of supporters to come help and keep the conversations going, making sure nobody's getting left behind and that everyone's learning, participating, and feeling welcome.
Avoiding crickets.
You don't want crickets.
No. I'm not good with silence, so I was going to interrupt Fiona, so because I was going to talk right over the top of her. Absolutely. I think that it would seem to be intuitive, right? That if you're building community, you need to involve other people and you don't have to do it alone. But I bet a lot of people do think, okay, I am the social media manager. I need to build community around this brand, but you've got to work with other people. That's the definition of community.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely.
What
It,
parts
it
of your
ties into that listening all the time too, so that
Yeah.
if you're starting out from scratch and you don't necessarily have that body of people yet, trying to, look for the ones that are, but it can be really hard. I have seen groups where, there isn't much happening. And then what I find also can go wrong there is when uh, there's just this constant stream of other content being chucked down on top, and they're not really trying to say, well, hang on, if no one's engaging with that, stop putting more of that out. You've really got to kind of tease. And even if that means bringing in somebody else from within your team, maybe to start a conversation, because once conversations start with somebody, other people will join in, and going back to talking about community for social media marketing, well, I mean, we used to have the group just for introverts, because the people, you got your lurkers, they are listening and they want to see stuff, so you've got to love those lurkers, but if you can love them enough, they start joining in, and then quite often they're very hard to stop once they get going. So, yeah.
Yeah, another statistic that Paul shared yesterday was something about, I think in most large communities, 90% of the community members are lurkers. And that's not all bad. Lurkers still find value in what's happening, even if they're not joining the conversation. You can learn a lot just by listening and watching. Absolutely. But if you can tap into a few of those lurkers who want to join the conversation, but they're just afraid to be the first one to raise their hand or the first one to comment, right? If there's a big blank comment section underneath the topic, it's scary to be the first one to comment. You really put yourself out there and make yourself vulnerable.
I think one of the fun things you can do sometimes just to help break the ice is when you do just say answer with a GIF or a GIF, whichever way you like to say it, and those sort of like easy comments where people don't have to it's sort of fun. So rather than them having to put any great bit of, powerful thought behind something, it's just a little bit of fun. And because again, that I think it's that getting people to relax and enjoy what's going on, again, keeps building that trust. They get more comfortable, and eventually that one day they're going to actually go, this time I'm posting, this time I'm saying something.
Yeah,
and,
something to add.
nurturing environments. Yeah.
Yeah, I think a good example of that was a couple of weeks ago, back when LinkedIn they launched their little laughy reaction, and that was such an easy conversation. That thing went boom. It was great inside social media posts on the
yes,
within the forum. It was great. That's an easy place. Do you like it? Do you not? Like, it's easy to answer, and most people like a laughy emoji.
Yeah. It was a long time coming.
Yeah.
I think.
Time.
Yeah.
It's like lighten up LinkedIn. Hooray. We can finally say, even though it's serious, we can still have a laugh.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we are rounding out the hour. We've been on here for about 50 minutes. I am to the end of my list of questions. So are there any parting thoughts that you ladies have for us regarding building trust around community?
Who's going?
Fiona, you first.
Okay. Look, I just think it's keep your energy up in the group, and make sure that if you're not getting a lot of engagement, try some other different types of content. Bring in somebody else from another team, from the outside the team. Just say, look, let's just get this conversation started just a little bit, and try to nurture that in the environment where people are feeling like they can engage, and don't get anything too heavy in there. If you make it very clear what the community is about and what they can expect from the community, and that you are there for them, then I think that will start to ease that the comfort level. And once they're very comfortable, well, then they're going to engage more, and the more they engage, I think the more the trust builds once they see that they're actually being valued. And if you can show you value the people in your community, because they are the communities, that we've got to value them. They're our humans. So love your humans and look after them. Yeah, lots of hearts, and it will definitely help to bring that trust factor is, and always own whatever's going on in there too. Something does go bad about a brand outside in the bigger world or whatever, own what's going on and just recognize it. Don't necessarily have to have a big discussion, but if the CEO did do something naughty or something like that, and you're going to say, okay, right, there's been something about that, but we're here. They're dealing with that. We're sorry about it, or whatever you need to say. So you don't skirt around it too much, but you also don't need to bring the negativity into the group. So just keep those positive vibes going.
Love that. All right, Jen, parting thoughts.
Parting thoughts. Well, I think it's important as a community manager to remember that everyone there is learning from each other. And also, as a community manager, as somebody that's representing a brand, if there is a question inside your company that you have about your users or your customers, don't you think that social media and your online community is probably a great place to get those answers? I think it's something that is just, people are too shy to do it, or they're too scared because they're afraid of the feedback or whatever. But I think it's a way to make yourself vulnerable. And we talked earlier about how making yourself a little bit vulnerable also creates trust. If you go in with attitude, hey, I want to know what you think about this. Are we doing a good job? What would you like to see us do better? What kind of product do you think would be, what would you like to see? Those kinds of questions. Then not only do you get to learn from your community, but they take some ownership on helping the brand grow. And I think that's a big piece of community too, that a lot of brands don't even realize, and it's overlooked, and it's sad.
Yeah. And if you can feel people in the community who have an idea and then it gets implemented by the brand and they feel like they have some ownership and they're seen, and it makes them even more, have more affinity for that brand. I'm a big fan of that as well.
Yeah.
Like feedback, open and honest feedback. Absolutely.
Yeah. And I don't mean to keep talking about how great Agorapulse is, but they're such a great example for, they've always done that. I know that Mike Alton has always asked the questions. If you ever think of anything, let me know. I'll shoot it to the team. And my gosh, does it happen? Like it's been phenomenal. I've never seen a brand like just so open and all about community like Agorapulse and Social Media Pulse are. It's phenomenal. Really cool to see.
I mean, I'm working here because they saw the need for social media managers needed a source of authority and a place where they could go and learn and make connections and upskill their career. And our CEO said, okay, let's make it happen.
Yes.
Let's get a full team to do it. I love it. Yeah, Emmerich's great. And
beautiful.
So I'm pleased to be a part of this community as well. Thank you so much, ladies, for joining. It has been a ton of fun. I have learned a lot and a couple of different ways to think about things. So thanks so much for your expertise. I have one more plug for the Social Media Pulse community about some things that we're doing right now that would be a great way to engage in the community for the first time if you haven't done it yet. And the first of which is called Camp Space Friend. So our mascot is Space Friend. We have our first camp happening right now, and the mission is to learn all about Instagram Reels. We hear from people about Reels, especially creating Reels for clients can be a little bit overwhelming. So Deb, our wonderful community manager, listened to the needs of the community and put together a great set of resources. So the easiest way to get there is to go to the Social Media Pulse homepage. It's right on the featured tile right up the top. You'll see Mission Control for Camp Space Friend. And there are all kinds of tutorials and challenges from all kinds of experts and content creators who are sharing their knowledge about Instagram Reels. So a great way to engage, and we can have conversations about it and ask questions in the community. So I encourage everyone to check out Camp Space Friend. Fun little activity and a way to engage in the Social Media Pulse community. We'll be back next week for another edition of Pulse Academy Office Hour. Thanks so much for joining today.
Thank you.
Bye.